Welcome to the Western Museum of Flight. I'm Museum Director Cindy Maka. We have a new way of presenting our exhibits and our artifacts, and they will be available to all. To help us do that, we have some of our most seasoned docents who are willing to guide us through the museum. So to start off today, we have Fred Peitzman, former Northrop Grumman manager of the laboratories and the wind tunnel.
Welcome to the Western Museum of Flight. We're glad you can join us this way. I wish we could be together in person, but in this time, it's probably not in the cards to do that. We look forward to the time that that can happen. The Western Museum of Flight, as you know, is located on the Torrance Airport, Zamperini Field, and we've been here for about a dozen years now. We've been as a museum for about almost 40 years. We're here because of all the wonderful heritage of aerospace in Southern California, particularly the LA area. The people started to realize, the aircraft manufacturers started to realize back in the 20s that this was a great place for airplane companies because they could fly year-round. Especially during World War II, the area really grew. And so what we are here is trying to preserve and present all the heritage of the aircraft industry, the space industry that started after World War II, and now all of the wonderful space and aerospace activities that are going on today. In addition to our role of trying to preserve and present that history, the other thing that we do, and equally important, maybe even more important, is to use that history to try to encourage young people today to study science, math, engineering, and be the people that create all of the wonderful history for tomorrow. So we hope you enjoy what we can show you about the museum now, but we look forward to the time in the future when you can come back and be with us. The Western Museum of Flight, actually its origin starts in about 1979, and it starts with the restoration project. The first airplane that the current Northrop Aircraft Company, now Northrop Grumman, the first production program was to build 24 patrol bombers for the country of Norway. Unfortunately, by the time these airplanes were ready to be delivered, Norway had fallen to the Germans in World War II. So the airplanes ended up in Iceland looking for submarines. By the time the war was gone, there were no N-3PBs left. They'd either been scrapped or shot down or had accidents in some other way. But the Norwegian government knew where one of them had hit a rock in one of the icy fjords. It was a float plane that had hit one of the rocks in the fjord and had sunk. They knew where that was. They called Northrop up and said, "We know where this is. We'd like to have that airplane restored. Would you be interested in helping us?" So Northrop said yes. Northrop sent a team of people over. They helped recover the pieces of the airplane from the icy fjord. By the way, it was really pieces. It had been in there for a number of years. There wasn't a whole lot of recognizable airplane left. They brought those pieces back to the Northrop plant up in Hawthorne, and they put together a team of volunteers to reassemble and rebuild the airplane. To do this, they established a nonprofit called the Southern California Historical Aviation Foundation. And that's who we really are today. Everybody knows us by the Western Museum of Flight, but our corporate name is Southern California Historical Aviation Foundation. This team then rebuilt the airplane. I think it really was probably the same old airplane with all new parts. But after the restoration was done, and they rolled it out at the Hawthorne plant of Northrop, it was taken back apart and taken over to Norway, where it's still on display at a museum in Norway. In thanks for doing that, the Norwegian government, when they retired one of their F-5As, which was a Northrop airplane, they gave that to the Western Museum of Flight. And that's the airplane that we have today at the Western Museum of Flight. One of the parts of the museum that I like the best is the part of the museum that talks about the aircraft industry, because it played such an important role in the growth of Southern California, as well as in getting ready for World War II and fighting World War II. One of the companies that we have a large display about is Northrop. Now, we have probably know more things about Northrop than any other company because of our founding by Northrop and the major support that we had from the company for many, many years. We also have not, in addition to the display that we have here in the museum, we've got a number of Northrop aircraft. We probably have more Northrop history than anybody else other than the company itself. The aircraft we have include the F-5 that's here in the museum, the JB-1, the Bat, which is one of the few flying wings of Northrop's that still exist. We have a T-38 on display. We have the YF-17, one of the two prototypes, and one of the two prototypes of the YF-23. But here in the museum, we have an extensive collection of models. Of course, Northrop did some very important things. In World War II, the Black Widow. After World War II, Jack Northrop started developing his flying wings, developed the B-35 and the B-49. By the way, Northrop Grumman, years later, developed the B-2 bomber. And the B-2 bomber is almost exactly the same size and wingspan as the B-35 and the B-49. So Jack Northrop's dream of a flying wing really came through. And of course, the F-18, while it's not a Northrop airplane, the F-18 grew out of the YF-17, which was definitely a Northrop design. And Northrop still builds about 40% of the F-18 today. So it's a great heritage. We're proud to have this history, and we think it's so important to maintain the history that happened here in the Los Angeles area, to keep it here in Los Angeles as much as we can. One of the most important aircraft companies in Southern California was the Douglas Corporation. Douglas started building airplanes back in the 20s. They built some wonderful airplanes, a mail plane. They built the Douglas World Cruisers, the first airplanes to be able to fly all the way around the world. It took a long time, but they did it. But the main thing that Douglas really did was their contribution to World War II. When World War II started, before World War II started, they had about 8,000 employees working in Santa Monica and in El Segundo. At the peak during World War II, Douglas had 160,000 employees working not only in El Segundo, Santa Monica, now Long Beach, but also several other plants around the country. They were a major reason why Los Angeles area turned from bean fields into houses, because of all the people that came to Southern California to work in the aircraft industry. As I mentioned, they had 160,000 people working for the company all over the country. And they built almost 30,000 airplanes. Can you imagine building 30,000 airplanes in a 4 or 5 year period? That's a lot of airplanes. But of course, Douglas is also well known for all of the wonderful transports they built. The DC-3s, which are still flying today, all the way through the DC-6, DC-7, DC-8, DC-9, DC-10 series. The final airplane that they built was the C-17, which is the major transport for the U.S. military today. Along the way, Douglas became part of McDonnell Douglas, and then the company became part of Boeing. So the heritage still goes on today, but unfortunately, no longer much of it happens in Southern California.